Tom Farrell. That's said to pray for Tom Farrell, evangelist Tom Farrell.
Yeah, he's an evangelist, the one I know of. He's a good guy.
Just diagnosed with a brain tumor, it says.
His wife had cancer.
Where's he out of?
Oh, I forget right now.
All right. All right, if you have your Bibles, let's turn to the book of Numbers this morning. It's good to be in the house of the Lord. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad you're here. Looking forward to what God has for us today. As I'm sure you are. Right? Okay. All right. Numbers chapter 22 is where we'll be looking at. Just kind of give you before we get there and get into our lesson. Let's just do a. We're not going to recap the studies. We're of course looking into the revelation of God unto His children and various different things we can see there. How God is sovereign God. How God is our help. He is omniscient, various different aspects of God. This lesson we're looking at powerful proclaimer, and that's simply whatever God says will come to pass. He's proved that time and time again, and I have no doubt that He will continue to do so. Church, He said that He's coming back, right? And, I hope that you believe that. I hope that you believe that, because I believe that the signs of His returning are all around us. A sign of His soon returning is all around us. So, all right, we're looking, the children of Israel have come up out of Egypt. They were brought into the wilderness. They were fed. They were given water. They were blessed, manna from heaven, all that stuff. There in the wilderness, God brought them to the edge of Canaan's land. They had sent spies out, 12 spies into the land in which God had promised them, the land in which they had forsaken when they had overstayed their purpose in Egypt. And it had all sorts of the inhabitants there, the Jebusites and Hittites and Hivites. All of them were in the land. Of course, Canaanites occupying it. Children of Israel went there, sent spies in the land, and they came back and said, man, it's a good land, but there's no way we can take it. At least how many of them said that? 10 of them said that. 2 of them said that we're well able to take it, and let's go now and possess it. And they understood, and who was those 2? Caleb and Joshua. Caleb and Joshua, they were the 2 spies that gave the good report, said that we're well able to take it. And the reason they were so confident was their confidence was not in their numbers or their ability or their mighty weapons of war. They were confident in their God, right? And so they were able, their belief was they were able to take it. The people, though, they believed the evil report. And the onset of our lesson here speaks about God's proclamation unto, okay, well, since you believe me not, you will not enter the land, everyone from 20 years old and upwards, save Joshua and Caleb. You will not enter into that land, but your carcasses will fall in the wilderness. And so they didn't like that. They didn't like what God had to say there. And so they tried to reverse their decision. They tried to go ahead and take the land. They refused to take it when God was with them. And then they tried to take it when God was not with them, and so therefore they failed, and they failed spectacularly. And one instance in our text, how whatever God says will come to pass. So, children of Israel now in the wilderness, and they are encamped around the Moabites. And Balak is the king of the Moabites, we see in verse number 4 of chapter 22 of Numbers. And he looks upon the children of Israel and how they're just spread all over the place outside of his bounds, and he's terrified. And so he calls upon Balaam to curse Israel. And so we had looked, last week we had looked, and let's go ahead and read some of this. It called Balaam to come. Let's begin reading in verse number 6. This is Balak speaking unto Balaam. Balak being the king of the Moabites, who was in fear of the children of Israel. Though the children of Israel were instructed not to go, they weren't going to go. They weren't going to attack him, but that was his mindset. That was his fear. And so Balak being the king, Balaam being the diviner, he called upon Balak. Verse number 6, come now therefore I pray thee, curse me this people, for they are too mighty for me. Peradventure I shall prevail, that we may smite them, and that I may drive them out of the land. For I wot that he whom thou blessest, and he whom thou cursest is cursed. And so Balak's faith was in Balaam's cursing or blessing. His faith was in Balaam. Verse number 7, the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with rewards of divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and spake unto him the words of Balak. And he said unto them, lodge here this night, and I will bring you word again, as the Lord shall speak unto me. And the princes of Moab abode with Balaam. And God came unto Balaam and said, what men are these with thee? And Balaam said unto God, Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, have sent unto me, saying, behold, there is a people come out of Egypt, which covereth the face of the earth. Come now, curse me them, peradventure I shall be able to overcome them and drive them out. And God said unto Balaam, thou shalt not go with them. Thou shalt not curse the people, for they are blessed. And so Balaam had his answer. And Balaam rose up in the morning and said unto the princes of Balak, get you into your land, for the Lord refuseth to give me leave to go with you. The princes of Moab rose up, and they went unto Balak and said, Balaam refuseth to come with us. And then Balak sent them again, and more honorable than they, verse number 15, and he was trying to essentially talk Balaam into it, bribe him into coming. And he says, verse number 17, for I will promote thee unto very great honor, and I will do whatsoever thou sayest unto me. Come therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people. And Balaam answered and said unto the servants of Balak, if Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more. Now therefore, I pray you, tarry ye also here this night, that I may know what the Lord will say unto me more. And so, in other words, Balaam had his answer, but because these riches before him, he sought maybe a different answer. And so he went unto the Lord, and the Lord said, yeah, go ahead and go with him. He saddles his ass, gets on it, and starts out. Verse number 22, and God's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. Now he was riding upon his ass, and his two servants were with him. And his ass saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. And the ass turned aside out of the way and went into the field. Can you imagine that? Riding down the trail, ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum. And then all of a sudden, it just starts turning into and going in the midst of the field. To me, that would be kind of comical to see that. And that's what happened. He turned aside into the field. Why? Because the angel of the Lord stood. Now, this is the ass that he's riding upon. It had more sense than Balaam. And so the ass sees the angel of the Lord, turns aside into the field, and it says, where am I at? What verse am I at? But the angel of the Lord stood in the path of the vineyards, the wall being on this side and the wall on that side. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she thrust herself again unto the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. And he smote her again. Now this is the second time. Second time that the ass had tried to get Balaam out of harm's way, and now he's hurt Balaam. Sometimes and this is really something to ponder upon, sometimes the Lord will bring you pain to get you going in the right direction. And so thrust him against the wall, Balaam's foot against the wall, and Balaam smote her again, smote the ass again. And the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where was no way to turn, either to the right hand or to the left. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she fell down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with a staff. And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass and said unto Balaam, what have I done unto thee that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? And of course, last week we talked about how, just if my dogs, I love my dogs, and I kind of, if you have animals, you kind of know what they're thinking sometimes, and you have a way of communicating. But my dogs, if my dogs were to open their mouth unto me and say, "What's up, Pop?" or something like that, I think I would be speechless. But that did not happen to Balaam. Balaam just had this wonderful conversation with the ass there. It says, what have I done to thee that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? And Balaam said unto the ass, because thou hast mocked me, I would there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill thee. And the ass said unto Balaam, am not I thine ass, upon which thou hast ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? Was I ever wont to do so unto thee? And he said, Nay. And then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Wherefore hast thou smitten thine ass these 3 times? Behold, I went out to withstand thee, because thy way is perverse before me. And the ass saw me and turned from me these 3 times. Unless she had turned from me, surely now also I had slain thee, and saved her alive. And Balaam said unto the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I knew not that thou stoodest in the way against me. Now therefore, if it displease me, I will get me back again. And so now Balaam sees the error of his ways. And this is a very important thing. He saw where he had messed up. He saw where he messed up. And because of that, he did not continue in a way that was perverse unto the Lord. The Lord was going to bless this and use it in a great and mighty way, as we're going to see here in a little bit. But he was willing, at this point, not to follow after the riches, but to follow after what God wanted. He said, right there, I knew not that thou stoodest in the way against me. Now therefore, if it displease thee, I will get me back again. Verse 35, and the angel of the Lord said unto Balaam, Go with the men, but only the word that I shall speak unto thee, that thou shalt speak. So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. And in verse number 36, then Balak heard that Balaam was come. He went out to meet him unto a city of Moab, which is in the border of Arnon, which is in the uttermost coast. And Balak said unto Balaam, Did I not earnestly send unto thee to call thee? Wherefore camest thou not unto me? Am I not able indeed to promote thee to honor? And Balaam said unto Balak, Lo, I am come unto thee. Have I now any power at all to say anything? The word that God putteth in my mouth, that shall I speak. And Balaam went with Balak, and they came unto Kirjath Huzoth, and Balak offered oxen and sheep, and sent to Balaam and to the princes that were with him. And it came to pass on the morrow that Balak took Balaam, and brought him into the high place of Baal, and thence he might see the uttermost part of the people. And so he took him up to where he could look and see the children of Israel scattered upon in the valleys and in the mountaintops, just as ants in an anthill, essentially, as we read the description in which Balaam gives here in his exhortations. He's able to see them at this point. He's able to see what Balak sees and what brought such fear into Balak. And so, again, just to kind of reset, Balak, his faith is in Balaam. If Balaam curses this people, then this people can't harm them. Church, let me tell you this, and that is, be careful who you put your faith in. Be careful who you put your faith in. His faith was in his faith was in Balaam. Balak's faith was in Balaam. If Balaam cursed him, they would be cursed, no problem. And so Balaam said, but whatever God puts in my mouth, I can't say anything else. I will speak that which God speaks unto me. So now, we see in chapter number 23, we see the beginning of Balaam's proclamations. And verse number 1. Balaam said unto Balak, build me here 7 altars, and prepare me here 7 oxen and 7 rams. And Balak did as Balaam had spoken, and Balak and Balaam offered on every altar a bullock and a ram. And Balaam said unto Balak, stand by the burnt offering, and I will go. Peradventure, the Lord will come to me, and whatsoever he showeth me, I will tell thee. And he went to an high place. And God met Balaam, and he said unto him, I have prepared 7 altars, and I have offered upon every altar a bullock and a ram. And the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth, and said, return unto Balak, and thus thou shalt speak. And he returned unto him, and lo, he stood by his burnt sacrifice, he and all the princes of Moab. And he took up his parable and said, Balak, the king of Moab, hath brought me from Aram out of the mountains of the east, saying, come, curse me, Jacob, and come defy Israel. How shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied? Now, there's something really to be understood in contrast between these two men. We will see as we move along, I want you to take particular note, that Balak had a will of his own, just like we all do, right? He had what he wanted, and he wanted God's will to bend to his will. Balaam here, although he might have been like that, he is not like that anymore. He is in verse number 8, and he continues on here through his 3 exhortations, and in his the culmination there at the end, he is now decided that he is going to follow the Lord, in the sense that he will only do what God had, what God was going to have him do, regardless of what it cost him. And so we see that taking shape in verse number 8. How shall I curse whom God hath not cursed? Or how shall I defy whom the Lord hath not defied? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone, and shall not be reckoned among the nations. In other words, they were a sanctified people. They were set apart. Who can count the dust of Jacob, and the number of the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my last end be like this. And so he gives this exhortation. He says, how can I curse these people? And then he essentially points them out. I mean, who can number them? Remember, he can see what's happening. Balak had taken him upon that mount so he could visualize what he saw. And so, and then we see Balak's reaction here. And Balak, verse number 11, and Balak said unto Balaam, what hast thou done unto me? I took thee to curse mine enemies, and behold, thou hast blessed them altogether. And if you look, I don't believe he spoke any particular blessings unto them, other than to say they are already blessed. He was simply confirming what God had already declared unto him, what God had already done in Genesis chapter 12. So, verse number 12, and he answered and said, must I not take heed to speak that which the Lord hath put in my mouth? And again, recall, Balak didn't care what God had to say. Balak cared what Balaam had to say. And Balak said unto him, come, I pray thee, with me into another place, from whence thou mayest see them. Thou shalt see but the uttermost part of them, and shalt not see them at all, and curse me from thence. In other words, he was going to take him to another place where he couldn't see what was happening, where he couldn't visualize Israel, where he could not see Jacob. He wasn't going to be persuaded by what he saw. Let me take you to another place. And so they go. He brought him into the field, verse number 14. Brought him into the field of Zephim to the top of Pisgah, and built 7 altars, and offered a bullock and a ram on every altar. And he said unto Balak, Stand here by the burnt offering while I meet the Lord yonder. And the Lord met Balaam and put a word in his mouth, and said, Go again unto Balak, and say thus. And when he came to him, behold, he stood by his burnt offering, the princes of Moab with him. Balak said unto him, What hath the Lord spoken? And he took up his parable and said, Rise up, Balak, and hear. Hearken unto me, thou son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, neither is the Son of Man that he should repent. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Or hath he spoken, and shall he not make it good? Behold, I have received commandment to bless, and he hath blessed, and I cannot reverse it. He hath not beheld iniquity in Jacob, neither hath he seen perverseness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. Surely there is no enchantment against Jacob, neither is there any divination against Israel. According to this time, it shall be said of Jacob and Israel, What hath God wrought? Behold, the people shall rise up as a great lion, and lift up himself as a young lion. He shall not lie down until he eat of the prey and drink of the blood of the slain. That's his second exhortation there. And there's a couple things to note. The first one that I want you to see is in verse number 22. Now, Balak had taken Balaam out of the sight of Israel. He had looked upon Israel, but he took him out of his sight, but he was not ignorant to what he had seen. It was a great number of people encompassing the land. It was a great number of people. And when he brought them out of their sight, and God gave him another word, and he began to exhort what God had said, he said in verse number 22, he did not say this people was so great they were able to conquer Egypt. No, he said God brought them out of Egypt. He had enough sense to speak the words of God and understanding that it was God's doing, not man's. God is the one that brought them out of Egypt. God is great and mighty, and so he understood this, and he's trying to get this through Balak's head. And so far, it has not happened. He speaks again, and this time he is blessing him. How can I do anything else? God hath already blessed him. And then we see Balak's reaction here, verse number 25. And Balak said unto Balaam, Neither curse them at all, nor bless them at all. Don't do anything. But Balaam answered and said unto Balak, Told not I thee, saying, All that the Lord speaketh, that I must do. And Balak said unto Balaam, Come, I pray thee, I'll bring thee into another place. Peradventure it will please God that thou mayest curse me from them from thence. And Balak brought Balaam unto the top of Peor, and looketh toward Jeshimon. And Balaam said unto Balak, Build me here 7 altars, prepare me here 7 bullocks and 7 rams. And Balak did as Balaam had said, and offered a bullock and a ram on every altar. So, as we look between this interaction between Balaam and Balak here, and what is happening, what do you see? Is there any comments on what is jumping out of you between this interaction between these two men? You have something you want to share?
Well, I mean, you talk about the interaction. Mine's a little bit different. I think interaction.
Yep.
I don't recall it. Autograph is color. When he that what happened on you know. I have how back
Okay.
panoramic.
Right, right. All right. All right, let's just move on to chapter number... chapter 24. Verse number 1. And when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he went not as other times to seek for enchantments, but he set his face toward the wilderness. Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel abiding in his tents, according to their tribes. And the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took up his parable and said, Balaam, the son of Beor, hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said. He hath said, which heard the words of God, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, and thy tabernacles, O Israel. As the valleys are spread forth, as gardens by the riverside, and the trees of lane aloes which the Lord hath planted, and as cedar trees beside the waters. He shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters, and his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brought him forth out of Egypt. There he is again. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. He shall eat up the nations, his enemies, and shall break their bones and pierce them through with his arrows. He couched, he lay down as a lion, and as a great lion. Who shall stir him up? Blessed is he that blesseth thee, and cursed is he that curseth thee. Where have you heard that before? Chapter 4. Miss Tammy, what'd you say? Okay. Prior to this instance. No. Yeah, there you go. Genesis chapter 12. Let's go ahead and turn over there. What happens in Genesis chapter 12 is very paramount to what is going on in this point in time in this scripture. This is God calling Abram out to make of him a great nation. Verse number 1, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation. And I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Verse number 3, And I will bless them that bless thee, curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. That was an unconditional promise by God. All Abram had to do was accept it. Similar to our salvation. We have the unconditional promise of God of salvation if we'll just accept it. We accept it by putting our faith in the Lord. He accepted it by putting his faith in the Lord. And he demonstrated that faith by being obedient unto the call. So we see Balaam here. Balaam is ignorant, as far as I know, to who Israel is, to their history of hundreds of years prior to this. But yet he is speaking the words of God, and he is reiterating what God hath said. He was obedient in his first exhortation. He was obedient in his second. And now he is obedient once again. And he is giving warning, essentially unto Balak. Blessed is he that blesseth thee, and cursed is he that curseth thee. What was Balak wanting Balaam to do? Curse him, right? That's what Balak wanted him to do. He wanted Balaam to curse him. He wanted him to curse him. Time and time again, we saw him state that. Verse number 27 of chapter 23. This is the third time at least that he said it. And Balak said unto Balaam, Come, I pray thee, I will bring thee into another place. Peradventure it will please God that thou mayest curse me them from thence. And so Balaam gives that last exhortation, which obviously does not make Balak happy. Balak is upset. We see in verse number 10, and Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam. He smote his hands together. Balak said unto Balaam, I called thee to curse mine enemies. And behold, thou hast altogether blessed them these 3 times. Therefore now flee thou to thy place. I thought to promote thee unto great honor, but lo, the Lord hath kept thee back from honor. Now let me tell you what the old Balaam would have done at this point. Old Balaam would have said, well, this is what God said, but let me study on it just a little bit longer and see if he has anything else to say. That's what old Balaam would have done. Old Balaam would have said, just like he did there in chapter number 22, in verse number 19, God had already given him his answer, and then Balak brought higher dignitaries there and offered him a king's ransom, essentially, to come and curse them. And he says, what God has said, I can do no less. He says, but you just tarry here this night, and I'll see what else God has to say about it. Old Balaam would have said that. He doesn't this time. Balaam has, at least from chapter 24 on, I believe, seen the light, so to speak. Verse number 11, Therefore now flee thou to thy place. I thought to promote thee into great honor, but lo, the Lord hath kept me back from honor. And Balaam said unto Balak, Spake I not also to thy messengers which thou sentest unto me, saying, If Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the commandment of the Lord to do either good or bad of mine own hand. But what the Lord saith, that will I speak. And now, behold, I go unto my people. Come therefore, and I will advertise thee what this people shall do to thy people in the latter days. And so Balak, he's disgusted with him. He tells him to get out of here. And he says, all right, I'll go. I can only do what God has said, but let me tell you something else before I go. And he gives them a what for, essentially, at the end of this chapter. Verse number 15, he says, He took up this parable and says, Balaam the son of Beor hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said, He hath said, which heard the words of God and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheph. And Edom shall be a possession. Seir also shall be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do valiantly. Out of Jacob shall come he, and shall have dominion, shall destroy him that remaineth of the city. When he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. And he looked to the Canaanites, on the Canaanites, and took up his parable and said, Strong is thy dwelling place. Thou puttest thy nest in a rock. Nevertheless, the Canaanites shall be wasted until Ashur shall carry thee away captive. And he took up his parable and said, Alas, who shall live when God doeth this? Ships shall come from the coast of Shittim, and shall afflict Ashur, and shall afflict Eber, and he also shall perish forever. And Balaam rose up and went and returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. And so there's several things in this passage of Scripture, this what for, as I called it. last dissertation in which he is proclaiming what will happen by the Spirit of God, by the knowledge of God. We see the first, he is also, we can see prophetic speaking of the coming Messiah. In verse number 17, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheba. And if you go on, there's a few interesting things here. He says, and when he looked on, verse number 20, when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. Let me ask you something. Where's the Amalekites today? Anybody know? Amalekites gone, right? They're gone. And then we see another one. And he looked on the Canaanites and took up his parable and said, strong is thy dwelling place, and thou puttest thy nest in a rock. That's a really neat illustration there. Puttest thy nest in a rock. In other words, they dwelled in a place that was of strong assurance, right? Whether they had great walled cities or whatever the case may be. But the fact of the matter is, there is no rock like unto Jesus. There is no rock that can protect, that can secure, like the rock of our salvation, Jesus Christ. And so their trust was in a feeble rock. Nevertheless, the Canaanites shall be wasted, till Ashur shall carry thee away captive. Where's the Canaanites today? Where are they at today? They're gone. They are no more. The amazing thing is, the Jews are still here. The Jews are still here. And just as he had prophesied in chapter 23, verse number 9 and 10, for from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone, shall be not reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, and the number the fourth part of Israel? What did God say unto Abram? He said, if you can count the stars in the sky, then you'll be able to count your lineage, or number the sand on the shore. I mean, the Jews are everywhere today, and they are the most persecuted people throughout history. Throughout history. That ought to tell us something about the power of God and the power of His promises. I mean, Mr. Hitler tried to do something about that, and not too long ago. And we see that he couldn't do it. Nero, he brought, his focus was more on Christians rather than Jews, but either way, the Jews, whether it was from the Arabs in recent history or the Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon and all of those that wrought in the land, none of them could destroy what God hath ordained. And that is exactly what Balaam is speaking in these parables, in these sayings, in these proclamations. In chapter 23, verse number 12. Verse number 11. And Balak said unto Balaam, what hast thou done unto me? I took thee to curse mine enemies, and behold, thou hast blessed them altogether. And he answered and said, must I not take heed to speak that which the Lord hath put in my mouth? God had ordained it. And God, whatever God ordains, God has the ability to make come to fruition. Whatever He has said, He has the ability to make happen. And that's the point of this lesson. And that's so vital for us as Christians to get a hold of. I'm not a Jew, right? I'm not Jewish. I'm not a descendant of the Jewish people. But I tell you what, I'm a son of the Most High. And because of that, I have promises that are directed unto me. I have proclamations of God that I can lay claim to. And you do too if you've been born again. And so it's very important for us to understand that God's ability has not diminished. I get older, I get fatter, I get weaker, but God has done none of that. God is still able, amen. He's still able, and that's a wonderful thing for us to remember. All right, is there any thoughts, or I think we'll close that out here with this lesson. Next week we will look at lesson number 12, speak about the love of the Lord. All right. Any thoughts on any of that? Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Right. Right. Yep. There's. I'm sorry? Are you talking about future proclamation? They were brought to it. They refused to go, so therefore they could not go? Yeah. He wants Israel. Well, he wanted Israel to be, he thought Israel was going to, the land of the Moabites, I'd have to look at the map, but part of that may have encompassed the promised land, but I don't think that it entirely did.
They were already there.
The children of Israel were instructed to go around it. They were instructed to go around it. They weren't to go in it. Balak was fearful of something he had no reason to be afraid of at that point in time.
They're still heading.
No, they're wandering now. They're wandering. They've already been rejected. They're rejected, and then this was directly after their rejection. So they're not heading there now. They're just wandering aimlessly like so many people do today. Yeah.
Another one, the version.
Right.
to walk and see, well, we'll do this for you. Kind of like that, quiet and submit to our false teachings. Then we'll open our some other item. This, Christ.
Right. Old Grizzly got a shave. Good to see you, brother. All right, anything else? All right.
One thought, if I could just say, as we're talking about God's word, starting Lazarus, Lazarus, come forth. I spoke to Lazarus. Every dead person would have. I've never spoken.
Right.
He had not been. Only Lazarus would have come forth because that's what.
Right.
And I mean, this you have to.
Yep. Right. All right. All right. We'll dismiss some more prayer. Brother Dylan, I'm going to ask you if you'll do that for us, please.